whoever is currently listening to this channel, I welcome you to I Can't Understand, a channel dedicated to the writings of the Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant. Before we begin today, I'd like to preface this video by saying I am not a formally trained philosopher. I have not studied the subject at the collegiate level. This is merely a hobby of mine and a topic in which I am deeply interested. So this channel is really an avenue for those of you out there who are more philosophically literate than I am, who have formal training in this field, to perhaps educate me where I have misunderstood the ideas of this great thinker, because these ideas are challenging, they're abstract, they require a lot of dedication to understand properly. And so I invite anybody out there to leave commentary on this video or any subsequent videos correcting my misunderstandings or any erroneous information. So this channel is not so much to educate, but to be educated. So that being said, the purpose of this channel is to go through some of the writings of Immanuel Kant and to try to give a brief overview of the concepts contained therein and to hopefully present them in an accessible and relatable manner. The first series of videos on this channel will be dedicated to Kant's Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics, and this work is a shorter work written by Immanuel Kant shortly after the completion of his first critique, and the purpose of the Prolegomena was to respond to some of the criticism he had received regarding the first critique and to clear up misconceptions and misunderstandings about that work. It's also to present some of the ideas of the first critique in a more brief and accessible manner. So what you're about to hear today is not a reading of the Prolegomena. It's not a word-for-word reading. It's rather my understanding of the concepts contained therein. So a lot of this will be paraphrase or my own understanding. Sometimes there will be quotations. When there are quotations, the quotations will be cited. So to begin with today, we'll just begin with the preface of the Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics. So regarding the preface, before embarking upon the task of engaging in metaphysical inquiry, it is first necessary to ask the question, is such a thing as metaphysics even possible at all? If metaphysics has truly been previously established as a systematic science, then why is there not some authoritative, universally accepted, irresistibly convincing body of principles that could be safely identified as the science of metaphysics? Merely to ask the above stated question as to the mere possibility of a science of metaphysics speaks volumes as to that supposed science's lack of reality. There would be no such doubt if the science of metaphysics had truly been discovered and previously established. David Hume, in his essay concerning human understanding, presents what strikes Kant as an enormous problem. The posing of this metaphysical problem awoke Kant from his dogmatic slumber and forced him to realize that the science of metaphysics needed to be built from the ground up, and that such a science needed to be established solely upon a priori propositions. Why was this? David Hume declares that reason has no ground upon which to derive the concepts of cause and effect a priori. To demonstrate that simply because something is, something else must necessarily follow, is a task that reason is unequipped to do purely a priori from concepts. Rather, reason unjustly claims for herself the derivation of the law of causality, when the credit actually goes to experience. Through empirical observation, the percipient observes the constant conjunction of two events, and thus comes to the conclusion that event A causes event B, when in actuality this expectation of event B from event A actually originates from a habit of the mind, which has been constructed via experience, and thus a posteriori. From this startling conclusion regarding cause and effect, Hume extrapolates that all such associations in general lie beyond the capability of a priori judgment, and thus metaphysics as a rational science is non-existent, because associations like cause and effect couldn't possibly have any application beyond what is experienced through sense perception, and even then only as a habit of the mind. So this is Kant's summary of the Humean position regarding causality, and Kant sees this as an attack on metaphysics as a science more generally. So Kant continues to say that the response of the common sense school of philosophy completely missed Hume's point, taking for granted precisely that which Hume called into question, and vehemently demonstrating truths Hume himself never doubted. Hume's question was not whether concepts like cause and effect are useful and indispensable with regard to the phenomena of daily experience, but rather whether such concepts could be generated purely a priori from reason, and thus whether such concepts had applicability to anything beyond the realm of experience, i.e., metaphysics. Kant decided to unearth all of the implications of Hume's conclusion regarding reason's inability to analytically derive a priori the concept of cause and effect, and upon doing so, Kant found that all such conceptual a priori connections are precisely the domain of metaphysics. Thus, if we can establish that cause and effect actually can be derived a priori, then we can establish that metaphysics as such actually does exist, since metaphysical questions as such can be solved a priori. So Kant set out to enumerate exactly all such metaphysical concepts, like cause and effect, and to demonstrate that such concepts can, indeed, be deduced entirely a priori, and not merely from habits of mind, which develop from experience. Thus, in so doing, Kant thinks that he has successfully delineated the boundaries of speculative reason itself, and has therefore laid the foundation upon which the true metaphysical science can be established. And so Hume merely discovered the problem, and discovered that problem only with respect to one isolated metaphysical concept, i.e., cause and effect. However, Hume chose to abandon ship on the shores of skepticism, so to speak, and declare that metaphysical inquiry based on a priori cognition as such does not exist. Kant, in his Critique of Pure Reason, sets out to complete the perilous sea voyage that Hume abandoned mid-journey, utilizing Hume's initial insight as a launching point from whence to chart the waters of pure reason with exactitude and precision, and thus to establish not only the possibility of metaphysical science, but also the form and conditions such a science must necessarily satisfy. Given the immensity of such a task, the Prolegomena is indispensable in surveying the main arguments of the critique in such a way that the relationship of each of the critique's individual arguments to the whole may be clearly comprehended, leaving the reader of the critique more free to engage with the nitty-gritty of the exact details.